Good morning, everyone. I just want to thank Roy again for that inspirational time this morning. Thank you so very much. Just actively writing so many notes on my sheet and gave me a lot to think about, so thank you. And thank you to Emily for some wonderful, thought-provoking questions as well. My name is Rebecca Lopez, and I'm an attorney with Godfrey & Kahn, and Godfrey & Kahn is proud to be a sponsor of today's event. I was invited to briefly talk about one of our initiatives here this morning and then introduce our next speaker. It's no secret that the legal industry has often had challenges in terms of developing diverse talent, recruiting and advancing and providing opportunities. There's a number of reasons for that. That could be a seminar all of its own. But one of the ones that I'll talk about is the financial obstacles associated with attending law school and then advancing in a career. On average, the cost per year for a student to attend law school is $49,312, and that can be more or less depending on the school that you're attending. And through various studies, it's been found that first-generation Black and brown students not only carry a higher debt load just to go to law school, but that debt load follows them and their families for generations afterwards. One of the ways that Godfrey & Kahn has worked on this very critical issue has actually been to develop a fellowship program. Beginning in 2004, Godfrey & Kahn established the Diversity Fellowship and sponsors a law student at each of the law schools for their entire academic education, meaning that their tuition is covered by Godfrey & Kahn, and they're provided a paid summer internship after their first year of law school, helping them to be more competitive in the legal industry as they're applying for critical second-year opportunities. 36 individuals have gone through our program since 2004, and we're very proud of all of them. Cesar Chavez has said, one of his famous quotes is, "We cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about progress and prosperity for our community." And that theme resonated a lot with your comments this morning, and as well as in this fellowship. Some of our fellows have gone on to work at firms in other states, and one of them brought the program to his firm on the East Coast, where they implemented it, their law firm, and we've seen it trickle into other opportunities for students. And so this is one of those initiatives that we're proud of, but we'd be proud if it was replicated over and over again because we know the tremendous impact it can have. And now I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker. Megan Connolly is a principal and senior DEI consultant with Mercer. For over 75 years, Mercer has been providing advice and solutions to build healthier and more sustainable futures for clients, colleagues, and communities. Megan has 18 years' experience partnering with Fortune 500 companies to help anchor their DEI strategies and evidence-based insights that lead to more inclusive and equitable environments and teams. Megan has had the opportunity to translate strong science into thriving workplace cultures and compelling employee experiences. Today, she's going to share how you can use data to guide your strategies and actions. Please help me in welcoming Megan to the stage.
Well, good morning, almost afternoon. I have the good fortune of being in between those engaging speakers, Roy and Emily and Rebecca, and getting you excited about data. And when I learned about that, I said, yeah, I do. Yeah, I am. Because data is the one way you are going to be able to help your organizations get to where you're going. Because you can't get to where you're going if you don't know where you are. And so we're going to talk about ways to use data to get to where we'd like to be. So enough about me. Really excited to be here. One of the reasons I'm really excited to be here is, I'm just gonna move this up here. In my role at Mercer, what I'm tasked with is helping clients turn employee insight. So that can come from, surveys, all different ways we figure out how employees are experiencing their workplace. Take that data and turn it into action. Any of you working in the talent space will know that collecting the data is one thing, but actually doing something with it, that's where the real work happens. And so in being able to partner with organizations on DEI topics, this year alone has been an incredibly explosive time. I've worked in the DEI space for the past 20 years. I cannot believe how fortunate I am to be in this position to share all the data that we've collected just in the past 2 years in this space from our clients on where we are. So just to set the context, it's been a tremendously busy year in this space, mainly because employees bring their whole selves to work, and they are bringing the experience of an ongoing global pandemic. They are bringing the experience of a global spotlight on systemic racism. They are bringing the experience of continued economic uncertainty and distress. And as leaders, you also know that you are experiencing unprecedented pressure from your communities, from your customers, from your shareholders, from your own employees to take action. And as a result, many of our clients are coming to us and saying, these are really important topics. We know we need to do better. We don't sometimes even know where to begin, what to do. And so the strategy that we bring to our clients usually is, if you're going to do anything, you need to ground that strategy in evidence, okay? So as I say, and I'll be repeating this a few times, it's hard to get to where you know you'd like to be if you don't know where you're beginning. And so in order to do that, we need to get really clear on the terms that we're using. And so when we say DEI at Mercer, diversity, what we're really talking about here is increasing the representation in your workforce of all of the different humans that we inhabit a planet with, right? Diversity is an incredibly broad topic. And what we're going to be doing today is sharing our data, looking at diversity through the lens of race and ethnicity. The other thing we want to be paying attention to is the E, right? So DEI. And what we mean by that in equity are purposefully designing organizations that allow the playing field to be fair, so that people feel that they are rewarded, that they have opportunities to grow, that they have inclusive experiences in ways that are equal. And then finally, the brain is social before it's anything else, right? We need to feel that we belong. And so the inclusion part of it is creating an environment where people want to be, where they want to thrive, and they feel that they are not just part of a welcoming team, but that they're working on things that make them think, I really want to be here. Now, we're going to start our story out with data, and we're going to be showing our data with you, sharing our data with you, in the hopes that you will take some of these exercises back to your own organization and use the data that you probably have readily available to create some more insight for you. So looking at a national level, we see data and labor patterns that show us that Black and brown employees are underrepresented in the American workforce overall. But when you look up in the organization and you see the way Black and brown representation continues, you see really pronounced patterns of progress to be made. Okay, so Black and brown employees vastly underrepresented at levels of senior leadership. And when I run surveys at the moment and I go in and I talk to employees and I say, how's your company doing on DEI? And especially in the past couple of years, a lot of employees will say, well, we're doing really well. We're recruiting a really diverse pipeline. And I say, but when you look up, do you see anyone that looks like you? Oftentimes the answer is, well, no. And that's where our clients have work to do. And so if this pattern looks like your organization, well, number one, you're normal. But B, I'm here to encourage you to say, this is the next step. This is where we're going. Okay, pipelines are strong, but we want to make sure that we're creating environments where people want to be and they know that they can thrive. So when we talk about a DEI strategy, we're not talking just about bringing diverse candidates in, okay? That, and I know a lot of organizations that are attending today are incredibly proud of the work that they've done, just in the past couple of years in terms of diversifying their pipeline. And for those of you who've been investing in these pipelines, you know how important it is to keep that talent in your organizations. And so the next thing we need to be thinking about is not just getting people in the door, but giving them the things that humans need at work. One of the great things about studying humans at work for the past 20 years is, I've learned that actually the recipe for keeping people engaged is not that complicated. What's complicated is actually making it happen. And what we need to focus on once we've got talent in the door is making sure that they're growing, right? Are people being promoted? And are we focusing on making sure that they want to be here? Are we creating compelling environments that make people think, not only is the playing field level, but I know that I can bring my very best, my A game every day, and this is a place where I know that I can thrive. So the first thing we're asking you to do in your organizations is to target turnover. We really need to start paying attention not just to who's coming into the organization, but who's leaving and why. The data on this slide, it's a super heavy slide, and don't worry, you'll get the slides. But the two things I want you to pay attention to are the green arrows on the left and is that purple? Purple arrows on the right. This is what we call an internal labor market map. And oftentimes, it's one of the first places we'll begin with clients to say, okay, if we're going to effectively set your talent strategy around DEI, we need to know who's coming in and we need to know who's leaving. And this map here actually is a collection of 22 organizations that we've chatted to just in the past year. And the really exciting thing about this map is that, this is just focusing on Black employees, really tremendous hiring rates coming in. But the other thing you'll notice is really tremendous exit rates going out, okay? And so these are organizations that have spent a lot of time and money recruiting candidates, but people are still leaving. And the question is why, right? And so we'll try to answer that over the time that we have together, but this is just a really great example of trying to get really clear where the turnover is happening, not just looking at global numbers in your organization, but looking at what levels it's happening, and then also breaking it down by all of the different demographics that you're targeting. The other thing you need to be paying attention to is not just who's leaving, but who's going up, okay? So this map effectively is saying who's coming in, who's going up, and who's going out. And the other thing you'll see on this map, and it's highlighted pink over on the right, highlighted in the middle, are what we would call bottlenecks. These are places where Black and brown talent comes in, but the talent doesn't go anywhere, right? And so people just stay stagnant in their careers. And this map, while perhaps discouraging, is actually a really important place to start, because now we can understand where the work needs to happen. Okay? So I encourage all of you to think about this. This is data that you all probably have. It just takes time and attention to think about purposefully, what we're going to do with the data. And so the next step now is to say, okay, if these patterns, these talent flows make you think there's work to do, what are we going to do? And that's where the why comes in with the data. So why do people leave? Now, humans are complex creatures, and in 100 years of looking at turnover research, business psychologists haven't yet figured out the silver bullet. But we've noticed some trends, some patterns. One of the key things that human beings want to do is grow, right? We all want to grow professionally. I heard Roy talk about the importance of curiosity. We're curious creatures. We want to engage in professions where we know we can make an impact, where we know we have meaning and purpose, and where we know we're doing the jobs that we were trained to do. So what we do know in the organizations that we're working with is that those talent pipelines need some work when we're looking at Black and brown employees. For the most part, many of our organizations say, we understand kind of perhaps that there are some blockages. We understand that we're not advancing Black and brown employees at the rates we would like to. We're not exactly sure what's going on, though. And so, we'll look at this slide and we'll say, okay, where to begin? The majority of the clients that we speak to recognize that advancing Black and brown talent in the organization is a challenge. we know that less than half of the organizations that we speak to track it, okay? So if you're in that half that is tracking it, if you're in that half that does have a labor map, congrats. If you're in the other half that doesn't, you're normal, okay? But you need to ask yourself, even when you do get that labor map put together, what might be going on? And, one of the issues might be succession planning. It's not just about putting talent in positions. It's thinking about what roles prepare talent to succeed and thrive in those positions, okay? So we know that just over half of the organizations that we work with, think about succession planning. Maybe an even smaller proportion have it for every single employee. But when you're thinking about succession planning, thinking about what are those roles, those P&L roles, those managerial roles that are going to prepare a person to thrive in the position that you're thinking about putting them into. And then what are we thinking about who's feeding those roles and then who's feeding those roles? So really being purposeful about thinking 5 years, 10 years before these key roles are filled, how are we preparing people for success? The pipeline itself for Black and Brown employees requires a pivot because some of the traditional ways that we choose individuals to be, promoted is one of those areas that is very hard to legislate, should we say. Some of the murkiest parts of DEI work happen in the realm of human behavior. And people make perhaps well-meaning, but consistent decisions that can consistently favor individuals who are just like them, right? So we've heard that conversation before. The human brain, kind of thinks, oh, well, I'm going to mentor an individual who reminds me of me at that age because I was successful, so why wouldn't this person be successful? And when those decisions happen over hundreds or thousands of times in an organization, your pipeline doesn't look as diverse as it should. And so these succession plans don't just happen on paper. They happen by connecting with employees and managers and debiasing the process, saying, okay, let's look at the candidate pool you've got slated to succeed you. Tell me why, right? Let's talk about this. Let's advance the conversation and consider perhaps widening the pool to make sure that the individuals that we'd like to have in 5 or 10 years are actually being supported now. So two pieces of homework for you. We're gonna prioritize retention by really thinking about that pipeline, but the only way you're gonna get that pipeline is to pivot what you would consider the sort of status quo today. One of the exercises that you can do is go back to your workplaces and pull together a graph just like this. Pull together the ethnicity breakdown of the individuals who are managers, senior managers, and executives in your organization. This is national data that we have here. And the trend that I'll sort of point you to, I've circled the green field there that shows these are African-American managers, senior managers, and executives. As the blue bar gets stronger, the green bar gets smaller. Same thing there with the, I can't quite see, but the Hispanic talent as well. The pink gets smaller. If that trend makes you think there's work to do, this is where the conversations happen, right? What's happening here? Is this talent leaving? Is this talent not being put in the roles that they need to be put into to be able to thrive in these organizations? Is this talent not even being chosen to be part of the succession plan? And so get in front of the data, work with it, confront it. Because when you see this data, now you know where you need to begin. The next thing we want to talk about is pay and rewards. One of the other key ingredients in a successful career for anyone is knowing that they're being fairly dealt with, okay? So we want to grow, but we also want to be fairly treated. And actually, if we don't believe that we're being fairly treated, we can't focus on anything else at work. Anyone who's raising siblings knows that the human brain is a finely tuned calculator for, am I getting a fair deal? And when you feel that you're not getting a fair deal, you really can't focus on anything else. And so this is where the study of pay equity comes in. This has been a tremendous area of growth for us over the past few years, and it's really encouraging because it means that employers are taking seriously whether or not everyone who brings their best every day is being fairly and rewarded for it, and that there's nothing about their demography that's getting in the way of being fairly rewarded. Now, I'm really pleased to share that about 85% of the organizations that we've spoken to over the past year do pay equity analysis, okay? And what that means is they're looking at who's being paid and trying to make sure that the playing field is fair. But, there's a big but. Only about 26% of the organizations believe that they're really doing a very effective job in terms of achieving pay equity for Black and brown employees. So what's going on? They're spending all this time, oftentimes a lot of money, tracking pay equity. They're noticing discrepancies, but they can't explain it. They can't figure it out. Well, one of the things that we've noticed is that performance reviews play a big role in how much an individual gets rewarded. And if you aren't debiasing your performance review process, you're not really setting yourself up to debias your reward process. So one of the places we would encourage you to look is at your performance appraisal system. We know that the majority of our clients actually probably don't do this as much as they should. Taking a look at whether there are differentials in the way that Black and brown employees are receiving performance ratings versus white employees, and if there are differentials, figuring out what's going on in terms of what can we explain, what can we not explain, where might human bias be playing a part. The brain does its best to create shortcuts. That's what we love to do. The strongest and laziest muscle in your whole body is the human brain, okay? And millions of data points are coming at us every day. And as leaders, I would say, anyone's gonna raise their hand and say, I will always try to find the most efficient way to get from point A to point B. And oftentimes in the performance rating process, we engage in all manner of what we will call shortcuts, okay? A shortcut is a polite word for bias. The brain is programmed to try to say, okay, let's get through this quickly. And in the process, you're gonna fall back sometimes on decision-making rules that mean that your performance rating procedures are not as fair as they could be. And so we really do encourage our clients to take a step back and look at those performance rating processes and say, have we helped our leaders debias their own performance appraisal processes? Are we comfortable that performance ratings really are as fair as they could be? And in doing so, we're really hoping that we're going to try to get beyond this stubborn place that we're in at the moment. Because one of the other things we're trying to avoid is people throwing up their hands and saying, well, there's pay inequities. There's always been pay, we don't really know what to do about it. So use the data that you have to be able to get ahead of it. Debias that performance management process. And the reason why I'm encouraging you to do this, and by the way, when I say pay equity, here's what I mean. Go back into your organization and think about ways to compare how people are being rewarded, but do it the way that we see on the right side of the slide as opposed to the left, and here's why. On the left side, this is a pay equity analysis that's basically looking at two main groups in your organization, okay? So you can look at Black and brown employees versus white employees, and you can say, oh, look, Black and brown employees are being paid less. Well, it's very easy to refute that data, especially if in your organization you've been recruiting Black and brown employees recently, but maybe more into entry-level jobs. And so you look like a regular American organization, and Black and brown employees are not up here in the higher ranks. So somebody's gonna say, yeah, obviously, we don't have a problem. It's just the way it is. Give it 15 years. It'll sort itself out. What you need to do is go into your data and instead, over on the right, do what we're suggesting, which is saying, okay, let's actually look at what predicts rewards in our organization. It's performance ratings, it's experience, it's all the different things that humans bring in. Hold those constant, and then say, are there still unexplained differences? My guess is, if you're a normal organization, there will be. And that's where the homework begins, okay? And if they are race-based differences, then we need to take a step back and say, what's driving these? Is it performance ratings? Is it something else? So, a very heavy data-based approach to getting at these really heavy subjects. And the reason we're encouraging you to come at this with data is because when you know where the outliers are, you know where to begin the work. Now, taking fairness into consideration, taking growth into consideration, the other thing people want to have is health. And the global pandemic has actually shown us the key role that organizations play in helping their employees buffer the stresses of their non-work lives in a way that actually makes them want to be part of the organization. Prior to the pandemic and the good old days, we would talk about things like helping employees find their mission and their purpose. And then all of a sudden, we were talking about helping employees feel physically safe, right? Feeling psychologically safe. And talent strategies suddenly became a differentiator because this is a way that we can actually help you bridge the gap of the world that you inhabit. Now, for Black and Brown employees, we see tremendous disparities in terms of financial well-being, physical well-being, mental well-being. And these are happening, for the most part, outside of the employment experience, okay? So we see the data up here on the slide, maternal health disparities in Black and Brown employees. We're seeing COVID disparities. We're seeing overall physical health disparities. Right at the bottom of the slide, we're looking at financial well-being disparities that are well documented in society. And, per Roy's point, this is not okay. CEOs are saying there must be something that we can do as leaders of organizations to try to disrupt some of these patterns, but what, right? Well, what we're suggesting is actually you have access to a lot of data in your organizations that tells you if your own employees are experiencing these disparities. And if the data indicates this, you actually can do something about it. My guess is you're probably not thinking about digging into this health or financial well-being data at the moment because almost no one that we talk to is. But we really believe that this is a really exciting new area to start digging into, because if you can understand where employees are coming from in terms of health or financial well-being inequities, as an employer, as an organization, you can come up with tailored solutions that might encourage employees to dig in and build wealth, or to dig in and access health resources that are already available to them through a lot of the benefits that you're providing to them. And this type of exercise can look like this. We worked with a client and we looked at all of their claims data. We looked at the way that they access the pension and a lot of the other benefits that are available to them. And we recognize that people draw on benefits and make financial decisions differently based on where they are in their life, right? So younger employees, behave differently than employees on the cusp of retirement. But we held all of that constant for this client, and we noticed some really important differences. You can see here the difference in that first row, the difference between Black or African American employees versus white employees on 401k balances, right? On 401k contributions. When you look at the racial differences in data and you notice that your Black or Brown employees are not contributing to these defined contribution plans at the same rate as white counterparts, that should get you thinking, well, what's going on here? how can we help, right? How can we target with educational seminars or different programs to say, this is here for you. This is a way to build wealth for you and your family. Same thing with looking at health claims as well, taking a look and seeing if there are discrepancies in your data, based on racial or ethnic categories that you really believe you might be able to help build the bridge through. And finally, we're really encouraging our employees to dig deeper into the employee experience. I said at the beginning of the session that we are social beings before we are anything else. The part of the brain that registers physical pain is the same part of the brain that registers the pain of social rejection or isolation. It feels the same. And if you are part of an organization where you don't feel that you belong, or you don't feel that you are safe to be able to share your brightest ideas, it's extremely distracting. And as leaders, the last thing we want all of our talent to be doing is anything other than focusing on how to bring their very best every day. And so really digging into that employee experience and trying to figure out how we as leaders can create a more compelling environment for everyone who comes into work every day is incredibly important. And the way you can do that is, if you currently are running an employee engagement survey, that's a fantastic place to start. Even if you're just touching base with your employees and seeing how they're doing on some of these 4 main topics of the employee experience that we really believe you should be hitting, that's a conversation starter as well. The most important thing is trying to figure out is everyone having the same experience, okay? Does everyone feel equally included in conversations? Do people feel that there are, slightly subtle but equally as painful ways that they might be left out of gatherings or important meetings? Are there unspoken rules for getting ahead that everyone knows but nobody really acknowledges? All of these different aspects of the employee experience need to be dug into. And when we look at Black and Brown employee experiences in the data, we've seen some pretty stark discrepancies. We know just over the past couple of years here that Black employees are twice as likely to experience retaliation for bringing up COVID-related concerns. We know that in the half of our clients that do dig into their employee experience data by race and ethnicity, half of those employers note sometimes stark experiences in how included Black and Brown employees feel in the organization. The devil really is in the details when you look at survey data. And so you can look at the employee engagement data and say, oh, everything's uniform, we're fine. But when you dig a little bit deeper into specific items, you'll sometimes see double-digit gaps. And one of the reasons why I think that statistic isn't 100% is because oftentimes clients don't want to look at the data because they don't know what to do with it, okay? So we can find a discrepancy that our employees don't feel as included, or that they can grow, or that they can thrive, but I don't know how to fix it. And so what I will say to you is conversational data, survey data, it's all the beginning of a very long dialogue. One of the things that humans do best is dialogue. We converse, we have conversations. And so when you see a finding that's concerning to you, your next job is to sit down with the individuals who gave you that data and to say, what's happening? Do you have any ideas for solutions? How can we fix this, right? Engage with the data, lean into it. Because all data is a reflection of the human experience. That's all this is. And my guess is if you're seeing inequitable experiences happening in your organization, if you talk to the individuals who are impacted by these experiences, they will provide you a wealth of ideas on how to fix this. And so the largest challenge really is not being afraid to open up and say, it's okay, I don't understand, but I'd like to, okay? That's the point of conversational data. That's the point of employee experience data. We don't know what our employees are going through on a daily basis. That's why we're engaging in this type of exercise. That's okay. But the biggest problem is not saying, I don't know. The biggest problem is not doing anything with it. And so I will encourage you, if you go back into your organizations and say, wow, we need to maybe get a little bit sharper view in our current employee survey around topics of DEI, be prepared to do something with the data on the back end. Because the worst thing that you can do is ask a question and set up an expectation for change and not do anything with it. So, don't be afraid to say, I don't know, but at the same time, don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and do something with the data once you've found it. One of the, I think, really interesting things that you can do with the survey data that you're collecting around employee experience is create what we would consider a journey map. And I would encourage you to do this for all of your Black and brown talent, especially for individuals who are newly recruited into the organization. You have an opportunity to say, on day one, how do you feel? And usually what we see in our onboarding data, we have the opportunity to touch base with employees in day 10, day 30 of their employment, is that most employees say, I want to knock the ball out of the park. I am so excited to be part of this organization. I am going to make such a large impact here. And then after about 3 months, 6 months, you really see some frustration coming in. And this is not because these human beings have had fundamental changes, in their personalities. It's because they're hitting frustrating conditions. They're not getting what they need to thrive. And so it's important to continue to ask them throughout that crucial first year of employment, how is it going? What's frustrating for you? What isn't? And it's okay if it isn't all going well, because that's how you know how to get better. And so ideally, with your new talent that's coming in, wouldn't it be wonderful after 2 or 3 years to be able to have a journey map like this? To say, these are the main questions our talent are asking when they come in the door. This is the enthusiasm they're coming in the door with, and this is what we do with it after 6 months. We need to get better. And in doing so, the organization learns how to help everyone have a more inclusive and thriving experience coming in the door. Things that you'll learn from this experience, you can apply to your entire talent base. So we have just a couple of minutes to kind of wrap things up, but I wanted to make sure that before, in case anyone has any questions, and I know you can text Corey Jo as well, might be more efficient. There really is no reason not to go back to your own places of work and just do something with the data that you have, right? The time really is now to act. Hopefully, we've given you some examples of just kind of easy things that you can do to figure out where you are, because it's the fastest way to figure out where you're going. So thank you so much. Okay, so we have our first question. Employers are finding many reasons that diverse talent isn't being promoted. Where is a good place to start when fixing this? How often should we reassess strategy? So again, the primary places that we believe aren't being usually looked at is what's that position that gets you prepared 2 or 3 years beforehand? How much exposure are we giving employees in those crucial profit and loss positions, those crucial management positions where they can be visible, where people can see their performance and their contributions, where they have metrics and data attached to them? So thinking about those feeder positions. And then the other thing is looking at those performance appraisal ratings, right? So debiasing the process. I'm sorry, I lost the... How often to reassess strategy? Annually. There's no reason to not be looking at your data annually. Looking at it every 2 or 3 months can be like checking your stock portfolio every 2 or 3 months. It's sometimes noise can get lost in the data, but there's no reason not to look at the progress that you've been making annually on these metrics. The next one was, are more institutions using stay interviews, and what are they doing with the data? So yes, so what keeps you here? What can we do? Those stay interviews actually are the one of the backbones of that journey map that I just talked about. So why are we waiting for people to walk out the door when we ask them, what could we have done better? Why aren't we touching base with them 3 months in and saying, how's it going? What's going well, but what could be better? And please be honest. Please be honest. And on that point, that honesty is not going to happen if you're not creating environments where people know that they can speak up be their authentic selves, and there are no consequences. And so I would say a real accelerant of the success of those stay interviews is allowing talent to see, oh, well, this individual was honest and they're still here. So I'm gonna try to be honest too. Creating a culture of psychological safety, I cannot emphasize enough, is crucial to keeping your talent committed and growing.